Good evening and welcome. Tonight we'll be going over the history and geography of New Zealand. I've got my camera at a very different angle tonight because this map is very long and I wanted to get as much of the country in the shot as possible. So, a little different than what I'm used to, but I kind of like it. Also, where I live now, it's a very windy night, and I have a neighbor with wind chimes, so you might hear those in the background tinkling a little bit. I also have upstairs neighbors who, for some reason or whatever, are extremely loud tonight. I don't know, it sounds like they have a fight club or something going on. I have no idea. So I'll let it out the worst of it, but if you hear weird little thumps and things, that's the upstairs neighbors. I can't control them. But New Zealand is one of the most beautiful places in the world, and I've never been there, I've never experienced it, but it's kind of a fact among everyone in the world who knows that New Zealand is one of the most beautiful and unique places in the world. We'll see a lot more pictures in this book after I go over its history, but just a brief overview of the geography because it's so expansive. I don't want to get too in the details. There are two main islands of New Zealand, the North Island and the South Island. The North Island is the more populous island. The most populated city of New Zealand is Auckland up here, and the capital city of Wellington is right here along the Cook Strait that separates the two islands. Both islands are very volcanic, but the North Island is a lot more seismically active in terms of volcanoes. There are lots of big, very famous active volcanoes, like we have Ruapehu right here and Taranaki up here. Also, the largest lake, Lake Taupo right here, is actually a crater lake. There's a huge underground volcano here. And there are lots of geysers and earthquakes and things that happen on the North Island. Now, a lot of the mountains of the North Island are created by volcanoes. But in the South Island, you can see this big stretch of mountains here known as the Southern Alps. These were created through tectonic shifts, in the same way that the Himalayas and the Rocky Mountains are created. So even though there aren't as many volcanoes as there are up here, there are still volcanoes, and it's still also a very active island. It's a little different in terms of geography, in that these mountain peaks are very snowy. There's a reason they're called the Alps. They're a lot like the Alps in Europe, in that they are big, tall, pointy, and for the most part not volcanic. And down here we get the fjord land, where magnificent fjords have been created, Milford Sound being the most famous of them. And it's absolutely stunning, this area here. The other side of the islands is a lot flatter, especially here in the Canterbury Plains. It's sort of a more farming area, and where most of the population lives. You can see Dunedin down here, and up here is a city that I can't pronounce with my accent. I have to say it very carefully, Christchurch. Where I'm from in California, we don't say the T's in the middle of words, and we barely pronounce CH's in the middle of words, so I say like Christchurch. So I have to say Christchurch, just so you can understand what I'm saying. And let me see. We also have lots of bays, lots of islands. Not just you can see here, but all around the island here, far, far out. There's Chatham, the Chatham Islands, I believe. The Auckland Islands, among many others. And let me just check my notes, make sure I got everything that I wanted to mention. Oh, I forgot Mount Cook. Let me see, right here, Mount Cook, or Aoraki, is the highest point in New Zealand, and it's in the Southern Alps. I meant to mention that when I was talking about the Southern Alps, but there it is. So, let's talk about the history of New Zealand. So, humans did not live on New Zealand until about the late 13th century or so, when the Polynesians arrived. They called it the land of the long white cloud, or Aotearoa. And when the people arrived here, of course, the Polynesian sailors had been going across Oceania for a long time, discovering islands and inhabiting them. But they came across what's now New Zealand and discovered a whole other world, completely different from what they were used to. So the culture that settled on the islands here are still Polynesian, but developed very differently than the rest of the Polynesian settlers throughout the islands, just due to the island's topography, geography, flora and fauna. For example, at this time, New Zealand was home to the moa, which were these massive 12-foot birds, big old flightless birds. The Maori people hunted them to extinction. But it's just an example of, you can see the kiwi bird here, the mini version of the moa bird. But there's just so many different forms of life and just a completely different, you know what I'm trying to say, a completely different way of living than on the other Polynesian islands, say like Tahiti or Samoa. Completely different topography. So their own culture developed, and we'll see lots of pictures. You can see a Maori person here on the cover of the book, and see all the different ways that their culture developed. In 1642, the first European arrived. It was Abel Tasman. He sailed in right to here and was promptly attacked by the Maori. 4 of his men were killed, so he took off and never came back and was like, this place is hostile. We're not coming here ever again. But in 1769, James Cook would arrive. Obviously, he received a warmer welcome because he sailed around both of the islands and mapped them out and returned many times to explore the islands. And thus, a trade agreement began among European sailors and North American sailors. They would come and trade goods with the Maori people. And this created some problems in that once guns were introduced, the Maori were very glad to have them because for a long time the many different tribes around the islands had disagreements and wars and all of that. So now that they had weaponry to this caliber, it got worse and the musket wars broke out. And it was quite a violent time. Same thing happened on Nauru also. Also, Christianity was brought to the islands at this time, and it's still the dominant religion today. In 1835, the French set their eyes on the islands, thinking that they could start settling on here. And the Maori were none too pleased about it. I mean, they were putting up with enough different peoples coming and going from their islands. They did not want these strange people coming. So they went to the British for help and to ask for protection. And on February 6th, 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed. Now, the Treaty of Waitangi did quite a few things. It made the British have complete sovereignty over the islands. It would guarantee the Maori to retain their land, but also gave the British rights to buy the land off the Maori, among other little things. And of course, the British broke it the first minute that they could, and the Maori were not very happy about that. And various wars broke out beginning in 1843. The British would eventually win out in the New Zealand Wars and would confiscate a lot of Maori land for themselves. The first representative government was established in 1852. When the Liberal Party took over in 1891, they made quite a few liberal changes, especially for 1891's times. They gave the vote to women. You can see there's actually a little fact right here. 1893, New Zealand was the first country to give women the vote. They established rights for unions, established a minimum wage, things like that. Things that were totally revolutionary for the 1890s. In 1907, New Zealand officially became a dominion within the British Empire. And, therefore the British and the king at that time had control over the islands, but the islands would do their own thing. They would be their own entity. It's kind of hard to describe. But New Zealand would remain at the forefront of all of the news of the world. They fought in both world wars. They had an economic dip during the Depression and a rise during the 1970s and 80s, 90s, much like the rest of the world. They're very much included in world affairs, even though the rest of the world kind of sometimes forgets about New Zealand. There's a lot of world maps where New Zealand is just completely not on there. Poor New Zealand. The only other important news to note in terms of New Zealand history is the Waitangi Tribunal in 1975, where the government was like, okay, we know the Treaty of Waitangi was a huge part of New Zealand history, and that there was a lot of misuse of it. So we're going to get together and figure out what's been wronged and right them. And they investigated breaches in the treaty in present day and eventually historical breaches of the treaty and attempt to right the wrongs that were committed. New Zealand is a very, very modern country. And as you can imagine, how do I describe this? The news of the world that has developed in New Zealand. So I really don't have anything else in my notes after 1975, just because I don't want to tell you things you already know. There was an economic slump in 2008, blah, 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 and all of that. Pretty much the same. That's pretty much where we are in New Zealand's history. It's a very quaint place. I actually follow a lot of comedians out of New Zealand. Taika Waititi has hit it big around the world, which is pretty cool. It was neat to watch his rise. I watched this show called Wellington Paranormal, which is The Office meets The X-Files set in Wellington. It's so funny. There's just a really good comedy scene coming out of New Zealand. It's great. And of course, the films that are made in New Zealand had a huge impact. You can see actually right here, there's some hobbits. Very famously, Lord of the Rings has been filmed in New Zealand, all the Lord of the Rings movies, among many, many others, because New Zealand has such a beautiful, varied landscape. It's perfect for a lot of the film industry. So with that being said, I'm sorry that was such a short history, but New Zealand's history is just not as tumultuous as other countries' histories, which is a great thing, It's good when I can go through history that quickly, because that means a lot of horrible things have not happened in New Zealand. There was a huge earthquake in Christchurch in 2011 that it's still recovering from. You'll see some pictures in this book. But for the most part, that's it for news. I really tried to scrape through the news of the past, 30 years to find something interesting to talk about, and it's just politics as usual. So, with that being said, let's look through the book. I know a lot of New Zealanders have been eagerly anticipating this video. You guys have been waiting for so long for me to cover New Zealand, so I'm sorry that it was so short. But I have a lot more to talk about in this book because it's such a remarkable place. I'm sorry about the light glare. I have done everything I could to adjust it. This is the best I could get it. I think with my new filming situation, the walls here are a lot brighter, so the light reflects off of them harder. I don't know. Here you can see the Auckland Sky Tower in the background of this really cool Maori carving here, kind of the old and the new together. Neat picture. It's the ancient depiction of the Maori arriving. The Southern Alps here. See, it's like if you squint, it looks like Switzerland, right? It's very much like the Alps in Europe. Some Maori, their traditional canoe there. Here's a political map of New Zealand, and here is Auckland Harbour. See the sky tower there. And this is in Wellington. It's a quaint little picture. And this is in the Tasman National Park. Isn't that beautiful? These are the Remarkable Mountains. Great name. Big rushing river. I think that is the, what's it called? The Waikato River that flows from Lake Taupo. And here's the Bay of Islands. Isn't that gorgeous? And here's a map of the Pacific Ring of Fire that shows all of the volcanic activity around the Pacific Ocean. And you can see New Zealand is right there. Lots of volcanic activity and a big boom from Mount Tongariro. There's another gorgeous picture of the Southern Alps. And I think this must be Mount Cook. Or no, Mount Ruapehu. Sorry, that's Mount Ruapehu. This is the pancake rocks, which you can see they're like layered like pancakes. And this is the aftermath of the Christchurch earthquake in 2011. A lot of the city was damaged. Here's another view of Auckland here. And this is a picture from Christchurch. That is so hard to say with my accent. There's a lot of botanical gardens and English gardens there. This is Sutherland Falls, the highest waterfall in New Zealand, and it's in Milford Sound, I believe, or it's at least near Milford Sound. Gorgeous beaches, and this talks about how the water flows clockwise in the southern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. I think I got that right. Yeah. There's a rainy day. And the many glaciers that surround the Southern Alps. And this is at Paparoa National Park. Look at these unusual rocks. That's really cool. And the big beautiful ferns, which are a very important symbol to New Zealand. Some kiwi fruits named after the kiwi birds. There's a sweet little blue penguin. New Zealand is home to many different flightless birds. Now I have to warn you, on the next page, there's a, well, first of all, there's a kakapo, which are adorable, but there's also a picture of one of the many insects, a weta, and it's really gross. So if you are bothered by pictures of insects, let me go like this. I don't want you to see it. There's the sweet kakapo. It's adorable. A big old flightless parrot. They look really sweet. So, if you're bothered by pictures of insects or huge insects, please look away right now. If not, I'm warning you, this thing is gross. So here we go. Oh, look at that. I could not imagine. I would love to visit New Zealand, but after seeing this, I don't know. Second guessing. That's gross. Anyway. I have turned the page and the insect is gone. It's a big guy, and yeah, I don't want to upset people. Here's some dinosaur bones, since there's lots of interesting fossils in New Zealand. And a beautiful humpback whale breaching there. Here's the kiwi bird, and the silver fern, which is one of the main important symbols of New Zealand. And over here are some hikers looking at the kauri tree. Here's a depiction from Captain Cook's team when they took lots of like drawings and sketches of New Zealand and their drawing of the Maori people. Here you can see some exploration here. Abel Tasman came in this way and noped out of there as fast as he could. And the rest are voyages from James Cook. You can see he went all the way around the island like a figure eight. And there he is, arriving. This guy is preaching Christianity to the locals here. And here's a school that was built for the Maori people. Some maps of European settlements. And let's see, oh, that's the Treaty of Waitangi being signed. Very important moment in New Zealand history. Here's some unhappy Maori chopping down a flagpole with the British flag on it. And you can see the various different battles that occurred during the New Zealand Wars. Let's see. Gold prospectors coming into New Zealand. Looks like they're not having a great time. And this is Dunedin in 1880. Soldiers going off to World War I. And this is a memorial for the women's rights activists who, especially Kate Shepherd is the most famous one out of New Zealand, who managed to get women the right to vote, first in the world. This is a primary school. You can see Mount Taranaki there in the background. And let's see, this is Auckland in the 1950s. And this is a mine that exploded in 2010, I believe. Yeah. Oh, since 1910. But it was in 2010. Yeah. Here is the Queen and the New Zealand Prime Minister at the time of this book coming out. Very patriotic march here. And here's one of the surviving copies of the Treaty of Waitangi. Isn't that incredible? There he is again. It was John Key. He was Prime Minister when this book came out. Here's Election Day. And a politician I've never heard of, so I have no comment about that. Here is the King of the Maori. He's not really like an actual king. He doesn't have any political power. He is just a figurehead meant to unite the Maori people together. So there's no conflict between the different iwi, it's called, the tribes. Here's the Parliament building in Wellington. And here's a map of Wellington and the gorgeous natural areas and beautiful European style buildings. Here is the flag. Let's read about it. It says, the first flag of New Zealand was born out of a need for a ship's home port to be recognized at sea. The Maori chiefs designed a flag similar to the missionaries' flag in 1834. It was named the United Tribes flag. When the Treaty of Waitangi was signed in 1840, Britain's Union Jack flag became the official flag of New Zealand. In 1902, the British ordered all colonies to redesign their flags using a blue background and the seal of the colony on it. New Zealand didn't have a seal. Instead, New Zealanders put a small Union Jack in the upper left corner to show their relationship to Britain. The flag also includes the four main stars of a constellation called the Southern Cross against a field of blue to indicate New Zealand's position on the globe. And you can always tell Australia has a big old star here. New Zealand's doesn't. So that's like the easiest way to tell their flags apart. Picking some apples here. Looks delicious. Here's a resources map. The biggest resource New Zealand has are sheep. Very famously, New Zealand has more sheep than people. Here's their currency. You can see Queen Elizabeth there on that bill. But they have all sorts of different people on their bill. There's a beehive there, the beekeeper. And let's see. Oh, those are apricots. Yum, yum. And beautiful vineyards. There's a lot of wineries in New Zealand. I turn the page. There we go. Oh dear. What a picture. This shows the Air New Zealand airplane with the, I forget the name of it, important Maori symbol there on the tail. Oh, I forget what it's called. This is at the filming workshop. Looks like they're working on some kind of fantasy movie here. But yeah, lots of fantastical movies filmed in New Zealand because it looks so unreal and beautiful. There's the big Auckland Sky Tower. You can bungee jump off of it, but you'll never, ever, ever, ever catch me doing that. Here, they're cooking their meat underground. An old traditional way of cooking. And New Zealand does have a part of Antarctica. Mostly the Ross Ice Shelf, which is also hard to say with my accent, belongs to New Zealand. Although Antarctica doesn't belong to anybody, that's just their piece of Antarctica. And it says this is a geothermal power station, some natural energy there. And traditional greeting of the hongi, I think it's called, among the Maori people. Here's a population map. You can see it's pretty spread out. Most people are around the major cities here, but it's pretty well spread out. So here it looks like they're performing a haka. They're all having a big jump at once. Pretty sure there's other pictures of the haka. If you've never seen a Maori haka, look it up because it's remarkable. There's a large Asian population in New Zealand, so there's some restaurants there. And looks like a fabric store for like Indian designs, I think. And this showcases some of the amazing face tattoos. This is the I believe most women get this style of tattoo on their chins, but different tattoos mean different things. This is a monument to the Treaty of Waitangi. Let's see, they're going for a hike up in the beautiful, beautiful mountains. A big, gorgeous cathedral here in Wellington. This is the original Christ Church in Christchurch that was severely damaged during the earthquake, and this is the new one that was built, meant to withstand those kinds of seismic activities. Here's a Diwali celebration here. And these are the ancestral homes of the Maori, or ancestral, council buildings, I should say, known as the, I forget how to pronounce it, because it's Maori. I forget, but it's the style of homes with beautiful carvings. Apparently, as the years went on, the more intricate all the carvings would get in the wood. And this is at a church here. Out in the water here and paddling, just as their ancestors had. This looks like a Hanukkah celebration. Playing rugby, which is a huge sport in New Zealand. Their team is the All Blacks here. And the women's team's called the Black Ferns. And there's a yacht regatta happening out there in the water. And there they go. The New Zealand ship. This is an America's Cup, apparently. They also play cricket there. Kayaking, enjoying the beautiful scenery. And out enjoying a music festival. See, this is the museum. Oh, I forget where it is. Does it say in here? Oh, it's in Wellington. Maury History Museum. And this really incredible site to see in Mine Bay. We've got another example of their incredible facial tattoos here. And this is Eleanor Cotton, who won the Man Booker Prize. There's Lord. I love Lord. She's fantastic. There's Peter Jackson, who directed the Lord of the Rings movies. And bungee jumping. Again, you will never, ever catch me doing that. I am a chicken when it comes to any kind of heights. Mourning the Fallen. This must be Anzac Day. Remembering those lost during World War I and all the subsequent wars that New Zealand fought in. Going out for a nice bike ride. Playing some basketball. Looks like it's a basketball practice. University in Dunedin. Really beautiful. And backpacking through the Fjordlands. Sounds really incredible. Buying some fruit here. And eating some really delicious looking food. Yum yum, look at those mussels. Pumpkin soup. And enjoying an outdoor meal. Oh, and that's the end of the book. Okay. Well, that is it for tonight, I suppose. I'll have another video about New Zealand for you tomorrow, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you found this video relaxing and educational, and I hope that you have a very good night.